Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? This is Preach Jacobs with the Worthy Cause podcast on the Arena Network. Go to thearenasc.com and check out my Substack page if you want to keep up with a lot of the columns and the writings that I'm doing. And also you can keep up with this podcast, Worthy Cause. This is the place where we're going to talk to people that are involved in music, arts, culture, politics, all the connective tissue that makes Columbia an awesome place. Well, I guess we have someone here that is definitely knows a lot about making Columbia an awesome place and being a big voice in pushing that narrative forward. We have one of our real guests on this podcast. I'm really excited. I don't know how we did this, but we have the 71st mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and he's also on the Free Times / Post and Courier Columbia's list of power rankings of the top 50 people in Columbia. I'm not sure what number he's on. He's probably in the top 5. We have Mayor Daniel Rickenmann here today. Thank you for speaking with us, man. How you doing?
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So here's one of the things I always say when I'm interviewing people from South Carolina, and more specifically people that are in Columbia. I've been an artist for a long time, been creative for a long time, and there was always this narrative that I was always told that if I want to do anything that's worthwhile, I need to leave South Carolina or need to leave Columbia. I need to go to Charlotte, I need to go to Atlanta, I need to go to New York. But I always say that when you make a decision to stay here, that in itself is a revolutionary act. And I'm literally an ambassador, but I find myself always feeling like I'm the defense attorney for Columbia, South Carolina, telling people how great this place is, how dope it is, all the great things that are going on. So I would say 2 things. What is it about Columbia that makes that impact and make you want to be run for a political office here? And tell us about how did you get inspired to pursue a life in a career in public service?
I will tell you, number one, I think Columbia is probably the best kept secret in the Southeast and always has. And for me, look, I came here to college, and I'll be honest, I had no desire to stay here. I was like, I'm here for 4 years. What's the quickest way out of here? 2-0 and go. Let's, move on. I was working a bunch of jobs, bartending at night, running at a law firm during the day. School was 25% of what I was doing. But what I discovered is I got integrated into Columbia and into the small business world of Columbia is that this is a community that supports small businesses, and it's filled with people with incredible talent. Nobody ever really knew about it. They just, it's the capital city, it's just a government town, it's just a college town. But when you realize, when you pull the covers back, all these small businesses that have grown and now are bigger businesses, there's all this creative type. I mean, there isn't a neighborhood you can't go into that there's some type of award-winning person in their field living there. And I don't know if it's an artist, if it's a musician, and for me, it was an incredible time to see Columbia really start to blossom. And you think about it, at that point, Hootie and the Blowfish hit it. Suddenly our music scene was talked about all over the country. We started to see our athletics teams at the university pick up, but then you saw our town growing. Small people were opening more small businesses than we've ever seen. I mean, I laugh. Christian Nemi and Ricky and all of those guys who came out of Mr. Friendly's, we all started at the same time. You had Richard Burtz and Dan that owned 3 or 4 places down in 5 Points. You had people who are now, Chris Carney, who worked at Monterey Jacks, now who runs all the Hootie and the Blowfish stuff. You have all these great talent. Paul Graham, who went to the university and now is teaching at the university, but runs all the celebrity golf tournaments. You've got these award-winning poets and authors and artists, and it's crazy how cool Columbia is, but we never told anybody.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting is when I first opened my first business, it was 1994, a handful of credit cards and a couple of buddies. We opened a restaurant, and that snowballed into a bunch of different restaurants. But what we were overwhelmed with is how the public embraced us and supported us. And I mean, we'd have judges and lawyers in there, and then we have neighborhood people in there. We had a cross section of folks, but that's how I got to know this community, and we were all working out and looking out for each other. And so for me, the transition to get into political life was I was a little frustrated that our government wasn't supporting our small businesses as well. They weren't taking us seriously and helping us out grow. And that was kind of my reasoning. It was one of those days when you came home and you're so frustrated, and somebody said, "Well, why don't you do something about it?"
Yeah, do it yourself.
So I
Yeah.
ran. So I ran. I ran for 2 terms, left, came back 5 years later, and was about to leave again. And then Mayor Benjamin decided not to run again. And I saw an opportunity. I said, here's an opportunity if I'm lucky where I can share ideas and look at things differently. And I'm excited where we are. I'm excited about working with a council that we really are on the we tour. You rarely hear anybody on council talk about I. It's we. We're working with our business community, with our communities, and we're changing the attitude. I think for a long time we Eeyored ourselves in Columbia. We kept looking down at ourselves and putting Charleston and Greenville above us. But the reality is, Columbia, I mean, we should be the number one city in the state, not because of population, but just because of the quality of life and the things that we have here. I mean, most people preach don't know that we get 16 million visitors a year. I
Oh
mean, it's
wow.
almost as many as Charleston.
Yeah.
We people don't realize, what we have to offer. And I'll give you a great example. Dennis Quaid has a show called Viewpoint on PBS nationally.
Mhm.
We got somehow one of the cities that they were interested in, and the producer was on the phone with me, and they were not. They really didn't want to come to Columbia. They're like, it's just a college town, but you made the list, so we're interviewing. I said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to send you some clips about Columbia and what we're about. And
Mhm.
so I went with the Experience Columbia, and we got a bunch of information. We sent it to them, and about a week later, they called and said, we want to come to Columbia. Did it, and their film crew came here. This I guess you'd call it spring, beginning of summer. We had so much going on that they couldn't film it all. But they were
That's
overwhelmed. We had no idea that Columbia was this cool. And I said, yeah, I said, y'all quit saying we're relatively hot. We're relatively cool. I mean, they
well.
got to go to Soda City. They saw, I mean, even Beamer jumped in and did a little guest thing in between the spring game. But there was so much going on. They were over at Benedict campus. They were over at downtown. They were everywhere. They got to meet a military family that chose to live here at retirement. They got to meet one of our business women, Carrie Vines, who makes the unbelievable brownies that she started in COVID. Now she's selling them at Soda City, and she does a lot of catering in town. But her and her husband run this little business. They make the best lemon brownies, and now they got a honey bun brownie. And I got to tell you, it's the downfall for me on a Saturday because I'm gonna eat two or three of them.
You
But
carb counting.
but it,
Well, I was going to say, you come from a background as a business owner, and I think that's a great perspective to have when you're walking into a job like this. I'm a partial owner of an art gallery in Vista called Soul House. For small businesses, uh, how's the city planning to help small businesses not only thrive that are already here, but to encourage them to open businesses, right? So you having that background, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you're hearing people that are in the business field that you can see kind of be like, all right, this is something that we can do to help out with?
So a couple things that we learned was just some of our processes really slowed people down. I mean, we had things that inhibited, and especially in areas where people really wanted to go build a restaurant. If you turn an old retail space into a restaurant, you were having to pay a sewer expansion fee, and that was coming anywhere from 25 to 30,000. We
Mhm.
made little things like that where you ended up the time you spent this money, you hadn't even bought your first piece of furniture, and you spent $50,000. So that inhibited. So we took those things away. It's now you can apply for your business license online. You don't have to share all your tax forms. I mean, doing the things, making zoning, parking requirements go away so people can focus on their business. People will figure out how to park and people know how to deal with it, but we prohibited businesses with those type of hurdles. The other thing that we're opening up is is our Office of Business Opportunity. Aisha Driggers and that team have gotten everything that's available to try to help a business, from facade grants to how to access funding both at the federal and state level. The other thing that
Hmm.
we're working on too is we had the SBA here to show people how they could take advantage of SBA loans, and success stories, real live folks that their testimonies talking about it. Now our next step is how do we access capital? And so Wells Fargo and several other banks and some private institutions are going to come down and show how do you access capital, because that was one of the biggest things that I've heard both in our minority, we have a mayor's minority business council, and from small business community, is how do we get more capital? The other
Hmm.
thing that we've been doing is we've been trying to increase our investment in local businesses, from the sense of how do we make sure that we can get more people who can do work for the city so that our dollars stay here. You know,
Hmm.
I can tell you from a minority and disadvantaged business, we have increased. We're more than we ever have, but we're not satisfied there. I mean, we want, our goal is to be 25% of all the business we do with minority businesses here locally. And when we say locally, I mean we really have to stretch it into like a 10 county area. But what I don't want to do is what's happened before, where cities go and they get a minority firm from Maryland. Well, that doesn't help us grow our businesses here, because the one thing we know about small business in our community, they when they grow here, they hire here and they give back here. And
Yeah.
that's the difference. Somebody gets a tax incentive, they can come and go, but people who live, breathe, and eat here, they're going to stay here and they're going to give back. And so we want to continue to use these tools in our toolbox. We also have probably 300 or 400 positions open, and what we've realized is that maybe we don't need to hire all these crews if we can generate working with small businesses here to fill those gaps. So, doing contracts, which we've done for the last 2 years, do open ended contracts so that we can use people on call. So, it's not a constant bidding, so we can get a lot of this work done. I mean, we were 6,800 work orders behind at water
Hmm.
and sewer in the February of 2022. And I said, look, let's just tell everybody where we are. We're behind and we're going to
Hmm.
fix this. But we gave the latitude to our utility and our offices to work with small businesses. And then we found out like there were 400 of it was landscape issues. And I'm like, there are 100 landscapers here. This shouldn't be a problem. Well, then we found out is when we were putting out RFPs or contracts for this, the insurance requirement was costing more than the job because it was set up the wrong way. And so we learned that we were making mistakes on our own. And when we fixed it, suddenly we could address these issues and we could utilize these small companies, which gives them other business. You know, long term, as we talk about beautification, we want to figure out, well, there are all these landscape companies here. What if we split up the city in territories? And as part of, they drive by every day, they help us weed and clean those areas, and we pay them to do that. One, it solves our beautification problem. Two, it gets us to continue to spend money that we're going to spend anyway locally.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because I saw you at this core event, and I think that one of the interesting things is retention, right? And a lot of times you have people that come to South Carolina, get their education here, get their training here, and then they get the hell out and go somewhere else and take all the knowledge that we've given them here, or given all these great resources, and they leave, right? One of the things that I'm wondering is that, what do you see as a way to retain professionals and graduates that are here? And what are some of the things that you're hearing from the people in the community that I know this is a national election year. We just had local elections here as well. I know there's conversations that happen a lot. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the community as big issues that are kind of sticking out the most to you, that you think are going to be the biggest priorities for the upcoming year for you to focus on?
Well, I think it's going to be a crossing both of those questions, and one is housing, how the housing needs. When we talk, so we created a council of collegiate engagement. And while we did that, we have all six colleges and universities. That's CIU, Columbia College, Midlands Tech, Allen, Benedict, USC, and Lenore Ryan, all coming and meet with us on a monthly basis. And the
Hmm.
purpose was that is why is our talent leaving? You know, what are we not doing that's exposing these young folks and these graduates to stay here and why they're here? So what we learned is a couple things. Number one, a lot of people didn't even really know the opportunities that were here, and I think it shocked some of our business community because I took that class to go meet with the business community, and they were shocked because they're like, oh, we have all these intern programs and we're reaching out, and they're like, well, we're not hearing about it. So
Hmm.
how do we do that? The second piece was they didn't feel like they were really engaged in our community. And so, how do we cross pollinate not only the campuses so they get to know each other, but they all get out of their 6 blocks of comfort? So, you know, sharing more events. We've done 2 side hustles. We learned that a lot of college kids have a side hustle. So, we gave them a block of Main Street doing Soda City, and we covered the cost for them to go and vend. Part of that was A, to get integrated in the community, but B, another way for these college folks to try something different and get together. USC gave 2,000 tickets that they had from left over for a homecoming to all the other schools, so those kids could go to the homecoming concert. So doing more to get them. And then the third piece really was the housing piece. Young people want to live downtown in a
Hmm.
tower with amenities, not big spaces, but they want to have a gym and a swimming pool and all of that there, but they want to walk to work. They want to be connected. They want to do just like they do on campus, is get all their needs within walking distance. And we don't have that because we've shunned away from vertical growth. And so that's one of our pitches is not only to grow young professional housing options, but workforce housing as well. Get more. I'd like to have 10 to 15,000 more people living downtown in towers, because more vibrant downtown then spreads all the way across the city. You got to build the core. Number one complaint, connectivity. Number two is the housing. So if we can create attainable housing, workforce housing, and young professional housing, and
Hmm.
then senior housing is the other request. You know, getting all that spread around downtown, more vibrancy gets more restaurants, which makes tourists happy, which creates more retail, gets us more hotels, which then helps us with the NCAA getting more tournaments. It's a snowball effect. Then that helps people who then at some point want to raise a family. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to go start moving into these great neighborhoods that we have.
Yeah.
The other challenge there is we got to start rebuilding those neighborhoods. We lost a very large population, and to be honest, mainly African American population who didn't want to live in the neighborhood they grew up, want a different school system for their kids, and want to be able to build a new house and have bigger. So we lost a lot of people who moved out into the county and Lexington and Chapin. Well, now we're surveying our entire city, and we realize we got about 2,100 empty lots. So now going back with the neighbors, all right, we need different housing. We need single family house, but we need duplexes and quadruplexes and townhomes. We need a cadre of stuff. That also allows us for people who want to downsize could buy something smaller and still stay in their neighborhood, which is the
Yeah.
biggest fear of a lot of our older neighborhood folks is I don't want to leave my community, but it's too much for me to handle anymore.
And
So
there's a
working
lot of,
together.
yeah. And I was going to say, there's a lot of like, people getting priced out of their communities, and we bring up gentrification a lot. You know, I've been in a situation where I'm looking at buying a home next year, and the apartment that I'm in, and I'm in the downtown area, beautiful area. During the pandemic, when the original owners sold we were bought by 3 like hedge firm companies, and the rent got doubled, and things are really all over the place, and that type of thing. And then just like you said, you're seeing younger couples moving to like I know some friends that moved to Hopkins. Some people are going to Lexington, and the idea of living in downtown Columbia or living in Columbia proper to find a home, they're feeling like it's just not for them. And that's something that I'm hearing from younger people as well. Is that when people are moving out of the communities, not that they don't want to be here, they just feel like they can't do it.
Well, and part of we don't have the inventory for them either. You know, like we found out the city owned 53 residential lots that we've owned for 2 decades and done nothing with. One of the projects Tony Lawton is helping us with is we're building out of the 19 lots over in Belmont, 5 of them are unbuildable. So we're building a pocket park there because there's no park there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're building 10 homes there, all for first time home buyers, smaller footprint, but they're going to be under $200,000. So with taxes, rent, when we're giving the land and the improvement, so that counts towards equity. And then we have the federal down payment assistance. So we're creating some home ownership opportunities, which we need because if you don't know this, less than 50, only 47% of all the homes are owned in Columbia. The rest of them are all
Oh,
rental. So 53% is rental. So I want to boost that number up because home
wow.
ownership is the quickest way to get individual wealth. And we got a generation that doesn't want home ownership, but we got a lot of other people that do. So how do we help those people get it? But if you can have that cheaper than paying rent, the other thing is we got to change the zoning. So the fact that people have the ability to build smaller units and multi units and higher density instead of just single family homes. West Columbia did a project called San Ann's Alley that a developer promoted over there. They're anywhere from 11 to 1,800 square foot houses, but they're stacked up real close to each other. They have alleyways. They got, the mailboxes is a community mailbox. They completely sold out.
Well, I got a
People looking
question.
for that,
I got a
you
question, and
know?
I think you prove a really good point. It's I come from an artist background, so everything that I speak of kind of comes from that lens. And one of the things that always happens as an artist is I always found myself, paying for a lot of events or things like that myself. And then I got into, there's grant opportunities, there's humanities, there's arts commission, those type of things. And the amount of people that are artists in the community that aren't aware that those resources exist is astounding. So I even think that half the time, I was on a committee of one of these commissions to help give people grants, and we don't have enough people applying for them, right? And these institutions are like, we want to give this money away, but there's a disconnect of people knowing that information. So I would say, because I think you're hitting a lot of nails on the head. If people are first time home buyers or getting interested in that, what resources are available and where can they go to find out these options or these possible programs that are available to them?
Yeah, I mean, our community development office, we get a lot of money from the feds. It allows us to do, there's money for a down payment assistance. The banks have it too. That's the other very interesting thing is that the banks here have millions of dollars to help put in that's part of what they have to do in their community give back to keep their charters in the FDC. And so we're trying to leverage those relationships to get more done, working with our community. So our community development is our first resource for that, for potential home buyers. But we're going to build 10 homes in Belmont, 10 homes in Booker, Washington, 10 homes in Martin Luther King. But we started surveying these communities and, people talk about gentrification, but you look at some of these empty lots, they've been there for decades. But what I want to create, or I say we want to create as a city, and we have really pushed forward is how do we go into a community and build smaller houses? So it could be patio homes, it could be these 1,100 square foot, or there could be a series of townhomes, or a senior component where we cluster 12 seniors in, 3 quadruplexes or something where not only they have the socialization, but they can afford to stay in their neighborhood so they can sell their house that they can no longer keep up, that's too much, but not leave their neighborhood. So how do you help people transition the equity they have into something new that keeps them in their neighborhood? And that's how we got to think about it as we develop, because we just finished this middle market study that the realtors helped us put on. And what it showed is 85% of all our housing needs for the future fall into multiple categories. And then two of the biggest categories is baby boomers who are retiring and downsizing. Second one is single moms with no kids at home.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity now for mom who's put all her money in her kids now to put money into a home and
Mm-hmm.
get her a footprint that's manageable and for her to have. And that's something she can pass on down the road. And so creating these home ownership opportunities and allowing people to stay in the inner city is so important. I
Yeah.
mean, we lost probably 8 to 9% of our population over the last decade. So we want to grow that back. And we see that indicated by the empty lots and everything else. How do we get the affordability? So if we don't have a cadre of products, then
Hmm.
we're hurting ourselves. And we're going
Yeah.
to utilize city land to help do that. So we become a partner. If we're giving lots is equity, and there is a catch to it. You have to live in that house for 10 years because we don't want somebody to come in there for a year or two and then pull all the equity out and leave. No, we want you to help establish and grow that neighborhood. So at least a 10-year stay in that neighborhood, but then using our bigger pieces to make sure that we have workforce housing and housing that's attainable downtown so that people who want to live in the core can live in the core. They don't have to live in the suburb. They don't have to live out. They can afford to stay downtown. And by us using our land and our infrastructure, putting in water and sewer, we can have that leverage point. And that's why we went to Atlanta and Charleston and Greenville and Charlotte to meet with developers who were recommended, but I wanted to go see what they build in their own community first, number one. Two, we wanted to see how they maintain it over years because it's real easy to build something, but if you don't invest in it. And what we found is the development teams that we met with invested in the front. So they got a quality product. I mean, we looked at products that were 5, 10, and 20 years old. They look better than some of the projects that we have that are brand new. And
Hmm.
I'm like, that, see, we should not satisfy for that. And so I think we as a city want to continue to do that. And I look at projects like what was built on Atlas Road, the
Hmm.
senior housing, the 55 and up. You go look at that. That's quality. It's been built to last in investment, but it's affordable and attainable. And that was a project that was done on a napkin sitting around in a room. So we know we can do it.
Yeah.
So that's our new standard. We're only going to invest in quality and
Yeah.
mixed income and making sure that people have the ability to take part in any part of this community. And we have the ability to do it.
I believe so. And I've been here, I'm 40. Like this is, I've been here all my life. And one of the things that I've always noticed is that traveling as an artist, there's always, I feel like sometimes Columbia and the people from Columbia have a low self-esteem about the community because we think that somewhere else is better. I've gone and toured and go around the Southeast, and I would say that our arts community, our creative community is just as good as anybody.
Better,
Um,
better.
yeah,
I'd
but
argue it's better.
yeah, but a lot of times these other cities and these other communities might have other platforms for these artists to be able to amplify their voices that we don't have. And so, speaking of like the artist background, I always think from that perspective. I kind of like look at how you became mayor, and I think you were kind of baptized by fire, becoming mayor in 21 during the pandemic, and it's just it's like all right, here you go, and you kind of like just throw it into the middle of all this stuff that's going on, and one of the things that I thought was a positive of what was happening during the pandemic was that it opened up a lot of conversations. Like there were a lot of things that were going on, right? So from an artist perspective, I used to joke that even if you're an artist that perform in front of 50,000 people or you perform in a coffee shop with 50 people, the pandemic was this equalizer. Everybody's at the house playing the acoustic guitars, right? And what ended up happening, I guess, worldwide and more specifically in South Carolina, is that these conversations started to come out because on top of the pandemic, you had the George Floyd murders, you had the conversation of inclusivity and Black and Brown people's interaction with the community and the public. And so when I'm thinking about some of the stuff that happened, I thought was really, really positive is that I started having these conversations about uh, inclusion from non-Black people about how do we help be allies, how do we help be involved, how do we help support Black-owned businesses, how do we help Black artists, how do we be involved, that type of thing. So I'm wondering, you know, Columbia is an interesting place because I think South Carolina is always considered red. Columbia is considered blue, and I think that Charleston and Columbia now have Republican mayors, and I think that that's great to be able to see someone like you cross the aisle and have these conversations and be able to like interact and cross the aisles to work with different people in different communities and different backgrounds. So I'm wondering, what do you think is the responsibility of the mayor's office and the political sphere to help with inclusion and to help with those disconnects between Black and brown communities, being able to, deal with policing and be able to deal with other forms of like systematic issues, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's judicial, etc.
Well, I mean, I think two things. I think at the end of the day, when you're the mayor of a community, you're a mayor of everybody. It's a nonpartisan race. It becomes partisan, as we all know. But at the end of the day, when you're serving, nobody cares if you're a Democrat or Republican. They want things done. And I think for us, engaging the community is the most part. And it's a two-way street. We've got to get some folks to understand that inclusion means both ways. You know what I mean? We've got to make sure that we're communicating together. You can't just pick and choose when you want to include somebody in the conversation. Either we're at the table or we're not in the table. Inclusion
Mm-hmm.
for me means at the table. Diversity, uh, inclusion is the real key to this, because if you're not at the table and you're not part of the discussion, and I think that's the best part of being a mayor, is that you get to touch everybody and you can work together. And I think that's why we've adopted the we. It's always about making sure we're all together. And you hit on a lot of things when we talk about our artistic community. I mean, it is amazing to me. There's so much grant money across the country, and nobody here has ever applied for it. I did a
Mm-hmm.
program with Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I asked them to look at how. If Columbia had, we have very few grants from outside, and there's millions and millions of dollars. So that's why we funded, one Columbia $100,000 for grants, to get a grant writer to help people get the grants. The money that we're raising through the stream arts and other stuff is going back for people to apply for grants for projects. I want artists to bring us projects and say, hey, I got this idea. I'd love to see us have an iPhone film festival. I'd like to see us do more in music. I mean, to me, live music to me is my favorite thing in the world. So if I can put that with food and art, then I've covered everything that makes me happy. Well, I'd love to see that for our community. So I do think that at the end of the day, it's about working together and building up the realization that we can get more done together than we can get separated. Diane Sumter gave me a book years ago, and it's pretty simple. It's black, white equals green.
Mm.
That's simple.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So continuing to work together, but we got to do things together. We've got some challenges, and we need support. I think we got one of the best police chiefs. I think he does more for every community. I think our officers, I've ridden with them, I've been with them, especially in one of our more challenged areas. Till I rode the night shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Mm.
And I'm gonna tell you, I saw everything. But what I walked away with is that we have some of the best police officers, because the compassion they showed. And I got to tell you, there were a couple instances that the people in the neighborhood spent more time filming everything than actually helping people.
Mm.
So we got to do some things together to improve it. But we can do it. I believe Columbia has more spirit, more opportunity. And every time I get an opportunity to talk about Columbia, people say, why don't y'all tell anybody about it? And I'm like, well, we're marketing, we're selling every business. But I tell you, when you look at Main Street, probably we've opened more women owned business and minority owned businesses in the last 2 years than I've seen in a decade.
Mm.
And I'll tell you what's so exciting is when I got to do an opening up at the Arcadia Mall. Young lady who started doing nails and everything at 16 now owns her own brick and mortar at 23, and built selling her own product next to a store that sells all black owned and black produced products, from deodorant to toothpaste to soaps to
Mm.
laundry detergent to you name it. That's when we're doing the right thing. And that's what excites me, is those opportunities are happening here in Columbia, South Carolina.
How do you think you help that? How can we help the disconnect? So if you're saying that, if there's a ride around and people are filming everything, I feel like I get it on both sides. I know, people in law enforcement that work hard, that are friends of mine, that are family members of mine, and I know like they just want to get home, right? And then, especially, what we saw during the pandemic, there's like this distrust from different sides, right? And I think that one of the things that I see that's happening now, and it's not just necessarily on a national level, but there's like a turbulence that you see with both parties kind of going at each other.
The national level is, we had this discussion this weekend at U.S. Conference of Mayors. I mean, at the national level, it's turbulence. But at the end of the day, when I talk to every mayor, and I'm friends with mayors who are Democratic mayors, Republican mayors, big city, small city, and we're all talking about just getting things done, working with our community, just clouding out the national politics. Because when it comes down to it, when I go sit on somebody's front porch, they're not talking about national issues and the craziness that's going up there. You know what they're worried about? They're worried about their grandkids having a great education and an opportunity, and they don't want them to move away. They're worried
What
about their neighborhoods and these empty lots, and how do we build back the houses one block at a time? How do we get the trash and all the stuff out so that these areas that don't have grocery stores, we can build up the density and get a grocery store there? How do we bring back those neighborhood businesses? That's what people are talking about. They're worried about front port issues, not national issues. And I think that's where we got to stay focused is at the local level, we can make a difference. And if we stick together, work together, we can provide an opportunity for whoever wants it. I think in Columbia, if you want it, you can have it. I don't think
Yeah.
there's a barrier that will keep you from there.
I think I realize like what I think my job is as a creative here, as an artist here, as a columnist here. I have to figure out a way to be the connective tissue, right? Because I think
Yeah.
the conversations that I have a lot of people, I know there's national turbulence, and a lot of times, when we were joking earlier, about feeling like we have to defend Columbia. There's a lot of times when Columbia is in the national news outside of Dawn Staley, I'm always kind
Yeah.
of cringing, like scared of what the story is going to come out. Um, and I always tell people I think politics mostly is going to be local politics. I think that's something we could talk about as well. Is figuring out a way to bridge a lot of those gaps together. I'm not sure if there are programs that already exist to be able to have like my theory has always been when we're talking about community policing and ideas like that, I don't want the first interaction law enforcement have with young Black and brown people to be when they're being pulled over for something, right? I want to be like, hey, this person, you've seen these people in this community. Now there's a dialogue and there's an understanding that this person is, who this person is as opposed to this someone that's suspicious, right?
And
And
I
and
think the
I
younger
had
that, yeah, I
no
would
go for
say
it.
that, with the police department doing more pals and more younger, having those positive interactions early is a
Pals, would you say
big
it's
part
something
of it.
program called Pals? You said something called Pals. What is that?
So that's a police basketball league,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing softball, they're doing baseball stuff. They did the pedals in the park where they gave away 50 bikes along with thing to deserving kids, having those positive interactions, and hopefully we can get some more local people to become police officers. One of the challenges that we have today, to be quite honest, is that our officers, we don't have enough. So they don't get to spend as much time knocking on doors and hanging out with people like they used to. I mean, I look back 20 years ago when we had a plethora and we had, you knew, but I watch when I go to these neighborhood meetings, these neighborhood resource officers know their communities and they work strongly with them. So I think there are a lot of positive things, but the last thing we need to do is have negative, and I think that's our biggest fear. But I think we can do that, and I'm sitting here going, what should we be doing? And you know what I think would be fun, and if you were up to it, I'd do it. What if we did once a month? You and I host a meet and eat, and we invite 6 other people to come, and let's talk about community issues around a lunch table.
I'm down for that, and I own an art gallery. We can do that there. You know what I'm saying? So to
Yeah,
me, and all right, I'm holding. We're filming this, so I'm going to hold this to you. You hold this to you, and
I love
and
the idea.
and for the record, you've been every time you said you were going to show up for something. Every time you said we're going to do something, like I hold you to that because you've been phenomenal with everything. And a lot of times I think that the biggest disconnect, whether it's community and law enforcement or community with public officials is that we have to figure out ways to humanize each other, right? And there's ways that realizing that you're a regular person, but I think also the other end has to happen where we have to figure out that like the people in the community are regular people, but they deserve to be heard as well. So I really commend you on you always having a reputation of at least listening and being available for it. And I would say this, based on me saying that you getting in here in 2021 and thinking it was a turbulent time, I know there was a lot of stuff going on. What is something that you think was a significant challenge that you faced as a mayor thus far? That was just this something where you were like, "Oh Lord, what did I, what did I get myself into?" A significant challenge that you think that you, for the most part, overcame, but made you a better person in this field.
You know, I will tell you, I think my biggest fear happened 3 months into the job was when we had the mall shooting.
Mm,
That's something that was my biggest fear is how do you deal with it? And I think getting people engaged and creating an office of violence prevention where we're tackling this issue and bringing partners together to really address the issue. That was my scariest moment because you're like, what do you do? How do you
mm,
react? Going to the hospital and talking to the victims was probably the hardest thing I've ever done because you're like, what do you say? I mean, who wants to hear the word sorry? I mean,
yeah.
they want to hear. And what amazed me is the people that I met there, they weren't mad. They were just like, y'all, we got to change. How do we take this incident and show people that this is not who we are and what we want. You talk about
Quick question.
Columbia being in the news, that was the worst piece of
Oh,
news we could have, in
well,
my
I
opinion.
guess touching on that a bit, guns is a really weird thing, right? Because I'm in the South, right? And so like guns is a very, very prevalent thing. I'm a gun owner. But I also know that when we pass I guess the best way to kind of explain it, the constitutional carry law, people don't have to have a CWP to carry anymore, right? And I always remember CWPs was those things where it kind of just gave an extra buffer of people, they have a little more training, that whatever. And it's always weird to me, right? Because I always feel like from a state level, theoretically, if we have a Republican governors always kind of fall lockstep with law enforcement. But from what I'm hearing, the lax on gun laws is something that would make law enforcement's job more difficult, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
and
true.
so
It's true.
and so trying to figure out that dynamic, how has that
Because you
impacted
got
you at all?
constitutional carry for somebody in Richland is totally different than somebody who lives in Pickens County. You
Mm,
know, they're not living in an area where we've got all these illegal guns and the things going on and we have challenges as a community. They're not having the same challenges. So when we get outvoted in the Midlands, they
hmm
don't see that. I mean, look, I'm a gun owner too. I believe that you have the right, but I think the best I heard was one of our older residents stand up and say, look, your gun, everybody ought to have the right to have a gun in their house. Doesn't need to be at the mall or the grocery store
Yeah,
or
yeah,
wherever, but also making people accountable for being responsible gun owners. I mean, the majority of these guns that are out on the streets are stolen because people leave them in their car or don't keep them locked up. I mean, I would say probably 70% of the guns we recover are stolen.
yeah,
I mean, it's just crazy. So, yeah, those are challenges that we have, and we're hopefully in the future we can figure out ways that we can deal with it locally. I think it puts our police officers in a very uncomfortable situation. I think it gives people who are carrying guns puts them in a bad position as well because some people go, well, I can do it. Well, just because you can do it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do either. You're putting people in just very precarious situations, and now we got to make judgments calls. You really are putting our officers in more of a alerts than ever,
yeah.
but
I
we
always
can't.
always joke. I always joke. I say more guns don't make me feel more safe, right? And this is someone that is a gun owner that I did my CWP training years ago. Now I'm kind of like, well, there's no use in having it now, right? But there was always this thing where figuring out, you know, that balance, right, of being responsible, but also knowing this is a right. You know what I mean? So I wondered what type of challenges you would deal with that. I also think one of the things that I'm interested in hearing from you, because I rarely hear this from South Carolina politicians, right? And we joked about our tagline being famously hot. I did a wedding 2 weeks ago, DJ'd a wedding 2 weeks ago, and we were outside. And there was a moment where I was just like, what the hell am I doing? And it was so hot outside that the bride looks at me and she's like, I'm so sorry, right? And we kind of laughed about it. But when we talk about famously hot, I never hear anyone talk about the effects of climate control and what we do on a local level for that. And you're one of the few people that I've heard speak about that. You're one of the few people that I've heard from local politicians talk about that. Tell me about your thoughts on that, because I don't know, anything that we can do to keep it being a degree or so hotter than next year around this time,
Well,
I'm for it.
we are really working towards trying to address that issue. One of the things that we did is a heat study that was done in Columbia, and it was done in August of 2022, and it showed we were about 18 and a half degrees hotter. So one of the things that you'll notice around town is that we have all these empty parking lots and everywhere. So one of our plans is not only are we planting more trees and working with the different folks to create more canopies, but really looking at where else can we create opportunities to plant trees and put more green space. We're experimenting with reflective painting. We're going to do some roads as they're getting redone with reflective painting. So pushing that heat up, pushing incentives to get more rooftops to be reflective surfaces, and getting that where we can push some of this heat back up, looking at what are our energy efficient appliances and air conditionings and all that. How do we make sure that people understand that if you put energy appliances in, you get a $5,000 credit from the government right now, and the Inflation Reduction Act. We're using the Inflation Reduction Act to take advantage of creating more renewable opportunities, but also weatherization, doing all the things that we can do to improve that heat source. But a lot of it is, there was a study done in 2014 in Columbia, and it showed that we had a mile in diameter of parking lots downtown. A mile in diameter. Think about
Wow.
that. So one of the things we were talking about the other day with a new plan that we're working with a consultant is how cool would it be if we could turn like the part narrow Assembly Street, but put in the middle of it these nice bioswales that help us with all the flooding, but creates more green space out there. You go to other cities in those spaces, people, I mean, there's somebody out there vending coffee and people are sitting around. They break up the traffic. How do we do plant more greenery in communities? One of the things that I looked at is we've spent a lot of time dealing with the colony for various issues, but when you look at it, that's a lower income community that has zero trees and anything in it, no real landscaping. Making that requirements, changing those atmospheres, doing the things that we can do, but bringing people to the table. We have this Climate Protection Action Council, and so they've come up with a plan to help us with electrification. How do we do? We're the only gold LEED certified city in South Carolina. We just got
Wow.
that status last year. I want us to be platinum. That means from building, that means all of the things that we're talking about doing. But I think the difference is that we're involving everybody in the conversation. And I think what happened in the past with climate change, a lot of people, because the sledgehammer approach, ran from it, but now it's a reality. I don't care if you're a hunter or a fisherman, whoever, climate change is affecting where you hunt and fish. And so when you include those folks in the conversation, when you include folks at the university and our students and start looking at it, we just got a $50,000 grant from Bloomberg to engage youth. And if we do a good job with those grants, then we are eligible for another $150,000 to help have the conversation. How do we change things? And this is where I think we can use incentive bases to help on the building side, but also continuing to invest in our infrastructure and look at it from the climate side. But that's, I think, the only way to do it is adapt what we have: reflective painting, trees, changing our cooling, having centralized heat and air makes a big difference. And if you have a ton of people having window units that are exhausting, that
Yeah.
creates more heat. I
Yeah.
mean, so we have to be smart about what we're doing if we want it for the future.
What kind of conversations are we having? Because I know if it's hot as hell for me, I wonder about the unhoused community. Are there things that we have implemented to help kind of help with those numbers as well?
Well, I mean, I think that our biggest challenge right now is our unsheltered community. We got more camps around town. We've got more people. There's not enough beds. The shelters are you know they were great at the time when they were built, but the reality today and the national trend that we see in city after city to get to visit is building individual units and getting people off the street and then getting them the wraparound services. And Houston started with that centralized model. They've reduced homelessness by 60%. Just was with Mayor Bass of LA. I mean, they got 79,000 homeless people. We went and saw Skid Row, but we also saw the pilot programs, and they're building 250 units at a time, but building it where they have the wraparound services. So people, they're not leaving, they're getting all their service, but they have a place to put their belongings. They have their own bathroom.
Hmm.
It's the things that change the dignity, and then they're accepting those services. So as we're having this conversation in the community, and some people think we're wrong, some people think we're right, at the end of the day, we got to do something different, because we have more homeless than we ever had. We have more unsheltered than we ever had. And between addiction, mental health, and all that, I mean, just the physical therapy part. I mean, there are people that are physically living in camps. They can't leave those camps. Well, how are we
Hmm.
going to get them out of if they have nowhere to go? So we've got to
Hmm.
change the narrative. So, this is a big part of our discussion as a council. I mean, you know, the numbers that we've seen, there's about $40 million a year being spent on homeless services, and we're not reducing the number. So, how do we change that narrative? How do we bring people together to be more partners and working together? And how do we make sure that we have expectations that we're actually getting people? There's folks that are arguing, well, I'm feeding and I'm taking care. Yeah, but you're enabling them to stay there. You're not helping them get the help they need to get out of it. I mean, it's great that you're providing these services, but if we're not advancing them to get a better life, then all we're doing is enabling them. We can't continue to enable folks. We got to help them get out. And the scary number preaches that a lot of these people are older. They're
Hmm.
not younger, they're older. That is not a good narrative.
As someone just in the community, how would you say that if someone's listening to this podcast, how could they help in their small way to contribute?
I think show up when we're doing these conversations, engage, want, support, trying to look at something. If you got an idea, let it. Now, I meant to say this earlier when you were talking about engaging in the neighborhoods. This council, this city is open to meet with anybody, anytime. And
Hmm.
and I tell people, don't wait till things get so bad. Start early. I meet with people every day, all day. That's what I do every day. I'm in the office. If I'm not in Columbia, I'm in this office, and everything is about meeting with people, listening to ideas, and engaging with them. So I think you want to send a message. We're here to listen and engage. And doesn't mean that every idea we hear is going to work, but you know what? It may improve something that we're working on. Little things make a big difference. And
Well, and I
so,
think
to me, you should take everything. You know, the best line I ever heard was years ago. My grandmother said, "You had two ears and one mouth."
mhm. Yeah, listen twice as much than you talk. I mean, like I said, I commend you for that because that's the reputation that you have, that you're always willing to listen. And I guess my final question: if we fast forward to your final address as mayor, and hopefully is far, far, far in the future, or whenever you want it to be done, um, what do you want that speech to encompass? Like, what do you want to have accomplished during that time period? I mean, if we're looking years ahead, what are those things that are on your bucket list as mayor that you want to accomplish, that you want your final speech to the Columbia community to be?
A little bit of it could be a little selfish in the concept, but I'd love to be able to stand in front of a podium and look at everybody and say, our children moved back because the opportunities that they left Columbia for are all here now. They have an opportunity for a job and job advancement. They have housing downtown. They have a quality of life and everything that they looked for somewhere else we have here. I mean, to me, that would be the ultimate goal for us as a city, is that our young people and our kids have every opportunity that they could have anywhere else right here. And I think that's what we want for our community. And I think everything that we're doing today really isn't about us. It's about our kids and our grandkids. It's about the future generations. And if we can build this economy, we can build the housing structure, the infrastructure, the connectivity of the riverfront and everything else. I mean, when we're done with the riverfront, we'll have 27 miles of trails. That's a tourism. We're working with Bobby Donaldson to look at how do we do what Montgomery and Birmingham did with the Civil Rights Trail. That's tourist dollars that could be spent here. And we have just as much, if not more, history. I mean, my family didn't move to the U.S. until the late 60s, so I don't have the depth of history that a lot of people have. But every day I learn something in Columbia, and I'm like, Columbia was a player from the American Revolution all the way through the Civil Rights, and a lot of things happened here first, and people don't know that. It's time for us to tell that story, and I think we have all of this culminating that makes us a city that people are going to want to be a part of, and our kids
Well,
will be proud of.
Look, I thank you so very much for speaking with me. I'm definitely serious about that idea. Anything we can do together to try to do some outreach stuff,
I'm
I'll hit
serious.
you up about that. I'm serious too. Yeah.
Let's do it. And I'd love to do it. If we could do you and I and six other people, I think that would be a great conversation and we can talk about all kinds of topics, but we also can hear ideas. And I think it'd be great if, we do one that's focused on the arts community, maybe one that's focused on neighborhoods, maybe one that's focused on small business, or maybe it's just a hodgepodge, but I think it would be great to harvest a lot of this because I hear a lot of people talking, but a lot of not people not talking with each other.
Well, I'll tell you
And
what I'll do.
collaboration.
I'll send you a message. You let me know some dates that you're available, and I'll pitch some ideas. We'll go back and forth. Let's make it happen. I'm definitely down.
Let's do it.
Um, and hey, this has been a pleasure of mine. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this is an episode of the Worthy Cause podcast. I'm your host, Preach Jacobs, with the 71st Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. We have Daniel Rickenmann, who's also on the power list. He's probably number one right now, but maybe one or two. I think Don Staley might be number one. Bring us a championship, you'll be number one. But we
Don's
had a great
always
talk.
number one.
He's always number one. Champ might be number
Hey,
two. Ace is number
when you
three.
got
So you
three of those,
yeah.
you're number one.
Yeah. Hey, help me get her on the podcast. But anyways, thank you guys for checking us out. TheArenaSC.com. You can check out all these great writers, great minds, great people from South Carolina, and me, more specifically in Columbia, talking about great things Columbia. Check us out on TheArenaSC.com. Check out the Worthy Cause podcast, and check me out on Preach Jacobs at Substack, where you can check out all my writings, all my platforms, all the stuff that I'm doing. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Thank you to the mayor, and we'll be back soon. Peace.
Peace.